These are 5 things that you must include in a cold outreach email if you want to get a response. So I know how it feels because I spent the first few years in my business and emailing people, connecting on social media, and that's literally how I grew my business. No one knew who I was, no one knew what I did, and so really the only way to get the message out there and to help more people was to reach out to them directly. And after sending thousands and thousands of messages, I've heard pretty much every response that there is, and I've seen what works and what doesn't work. So in this video, I want to give you 5 key elements that you need to include when you're reaching out to someone cold, whether it's on email, whether it's on LinkedIn, any other social media platform, if you want to get a response and you want to sound like a human and not a salesy, spammy robot. So the problem is typically that there are kind of 2 ways that people go about this. Either they create some kind of generic template, and as much as we try and customize it and use AI and lots of clever things, it kind of still sounds a little bit generic, and we go for a numbers game. So we try and send that to as many people as possible to see if we get a response. The other end of the spectrum is where we get hyper personalized and we spend way too long thinking about what to say, how we're saying it, whether the message is too long, too short. And most of the time we just kind of get caught in our head and we only send a few messages and it just isn't enough volume. So what I want to give you is a structure which is kind of in the middle. So you don't have to overthink all of your messages, but they still come across personalized because there's an element of personalization in it where you sound human. So we call this the connection chemistry formula. And I talk about it more in an ebook that I created. It's called Creative Control, and it's all about how to take back control of the prospecting process and build a system, which means you're not relying on word of mouth inquiries and referrals. If you want to grab a copy of that, there should be a link in the description below. And it talks about these 5 things. One of the elements that was kind of key to building this book and key to getting the results that we did get in order to build a business past 6 figures pretty much just organically through direct outreach. Every single message had one of these 5 elements. So I just want to run you through these things so that you can apply this to your business. So let's start with the reason. Now might sound like a bit of a weird one, but there was an experiment that was done, I think in the 80s, where there were people that wanted to do something, and they tried this with like lots of different stuff. But one of the examples that is fresh in my memory is somebody who was in a queue and they wanted to get to the front. And they used this as an experiment, and they said to the people in the front of the queue, hey, do you mind if I push in? Or do you mind if I join here? Right? That was one group. And another group said, hey, do you mind if I join here because, and they just gave a reason, right? And they tried lots of different things. It didn't seem to matter what the reason was. Just group A, who didn't have a reason, basically got everyone saying no. And group B, who did have a reason, got lots of people saying yes. So it might sound a bit weird giving someone a reason why you're actually reaching out, but it's one of the most important things because it does a few things. Number one, it plays on that psychological phenomenon. When you've got a reason, people tend to accept things a lot more. And if I can find the study, I will link to it in the description below. The second thing is that people want to know up front, like, what are you trying to get here? Like, what's your game? Are you trying to sell something to me? Are you trying to, poach my network? Like, what's going on? Typically our kind of monkey brain, our like primal brain, is on high alert when there's a stranger that we don't know that's trying to talk to us or trying to reach out to us. That's just a very human natural instinct. So we've got to bear that in mind when we're reaching out and trying to build connections. So one of the first things you can do is just give someone a reason, say, hey, the reason I'm reaching out is, now on a social platform like LinkedIn, this one's quite easy because LinkedIn does a really cool thing and it tells you like recommended connections, the same way Instagram gives you recommended people to follow. So you could just say the reason that that I'm reaching out is because you came up in my recommended connections. Now, if you can do this with a mutual contact, this is even more valuable because it plays into this part here, which I'll talk about in a minute, which is the anchor. So if you can say, hey, I'm reaching out because John recommended that I speak to you, and John is somebody that they know, this is a really, really powerful technique because it disarms them straight away. They're like, oh, if John said that you should reach out, then this person must be okay. Like John is almost giving me permission to come and talk to you. So if you can find a mutual contact and you can actually use other people's networks and say, hey, by the way, I'm looking to speak to these kind of people. Do you know anyone? And someone says, oh yeah, actually I know Katie or whatever. Then that's a really powerful way to get more than one of these in a single sentence. But if you don't have something like this, then I would just literally say, hey, I came across your website, I found you on LinkedIn, and I was listening to this podcast episode, or I was reading this article or something. And that brings me on to my second point, which is giving them a genuine compliment, right? People get disarmed very easily when you give them a compliment that is two things. First of all, I'll try and do my G's a little bit better. Let me zoom into my iPad so I can actually write. The first thing is it's genuine. Like it's not just some thing that you're saying to make them feel good. And the second thing is it's specific. So if you give someone a specific compliment, and one of the ways to do this is to include the word because, this will have much more effect than a generic compliment, right? So I'll give you an example. Let's say I'm reaching out because I want to be on someone's podcast. By the way, these 5 principles, they apply to lots of things, whether you want to build a connection with a partnership, whether it's a potential client, whether it's like a speaking opportunity or podcast or whatever it is. This principle is around basically taking someone from not knowing who you are to becoming a friend or a client or a partner, right? These 5 principles are what you need to really embed in this communication. So let's use an example of a specific compliment. Let's say I'm trying to get on a podcast and I just say, hey, I've been listening to your podcast and I really like it. It's great. That's a kind of generic, non-specific compliment. If I say, I've been listening to your podcast and it really spoke to me because, and I give them a specific example or a specific reason, like, I struggle with this in my personal life, or I work with clients that have these problems, and in episode 4 you talk about this, then that's going to be way more powerful. And again, I know I said at the beginning we don't want to spend ages thinking about what we want to say, so it's really important that you kind of know who you want to talk to and who you want to connect with, so that this can be formalized a little bit and put into a bit of a structure. Okay, so hey, John, I'm reaching out because I was just listening to your podcast and episode number 4 really spoke to me. I've struggled with these things in the past, and I think it's really important that we talk about this topic, right? It doesn't have to be super in depth or complicated. Just lost that. Let's take that back. So the next thing that we then want to include in this message is some kind of value. Now, as I'm saying this out loud, potentially what I would do is switch these 2 around. So let me talk to you about value in a minute, and let me just talk to you about the anchor first. So an anchor is really just something that creates some common ground between 2 people. So if you're a sports fan, you will have this experience all the time. Let's say you go on holiday or you travel somewhere and you get chatting to a few people and they support the same sports team as you. Automatically you feel some kind of affinity to them, right? You feel like there's some common ground, and that's all an anchor really is. It's just like a common ground, something that means that you're not just this stranger, you're within my world slightly. And this can be a bunch of stuff. In fact, I've got a little cheat sheet here for like common anchors, but it could be where you're from, it could be where you grew up, it could be your religious preference. Like there's so many things. It's like, hey, you're one of me, you're not just an outsider. So an anchor is a really powerful thing. And it actually helps disarm people a little bit. And the more specific you can be with this, again, the better, but we don't want to get to the point where we're massively overthinking. So an anchor, an example of an anchor in this case, might be something like, I was a guest on so-and-so's podcast, maybe that we know that they've listened to, or the person that they've heard of, right? So, hey, I'm reaching out because I was listening to your podcast, episode so-and-so really spoke to me. And I also spoke about this topic, or I was speaking about a similar topic on so-and-so's podcast, right? So there's some kind of connection there. There's something that we both mutually have. It shows I've been a guest on podcasts before. They know who that person is. There's some kind of anchor. It's created that safety. There's a bunch of these, and I'll share some with you in a minute. Then value. This is quite an important one, and I'm gonna do. This is kind of getting like one of those crazy helter-skelter diagrams. But the value part is really important. So the value is where I'm actually going to pitch something which is valuable to them. Okay, so the question you want to be asking is what is in it for them, right? What's in it for them? This part is a little bit trickier, but one of the things that we do with our clients is we actually help them create what's called an irresistible offer. So they're always pitching the same thing. They're always pitching the same value, so they don't have to think loads about it. And it's something that is a bit of a no-brainer for those kind of people, because usually it's free, usually it's easy. And like an example of an irresistible offer is the thing that I'm saying, right? Hey, I've got this cheat sheet. Go and grab it in the link below. It's a guide that shows you how to make cold outreach work for your business, as an example, right? It's kind of a no-brainer, because if you are struggling with that challenge right now, it's something that's going to help you specifically with that, and it's free, so it's going to be highly valuable, and there's very little risk for you. And hopefully, if you've seen some of my videos before or know anything about me, you know that I'm not just going to spam you trying to sell you loads of stuff, right? So that's kind of like a high value piece. So what are you going to offer them? And so this could be anything. It could be like a free audit. It could be some ideas. What are they going to get from this? So in this instance, what I would usually do as a podcast, if I'm pitching to a podcast, is I would offer to promote that episode or that podcast, right? I'd say, hey, I've got a bunch of people on my email list. I've got a bunch of people on social media that I think would find this really valuable. Okay. How about, and this is where we come down to the ask down here, right? Is how about we record an episode together about this particular topic that I know people will find valuable and relevant, and I will help you promote it to my audience, as an example, right? So if we include these elements, and I know you probably want to see specific examples and things like that, but I don't want to get too bogged down into scripts, because scripts go the other end of the spectrum. Like what script works for me might not work for you in your niche. What's really important is that you construct something like this yourself, so that you have an outline, you have a template, a thing that you know roughly what you're going to say, and then you go and just kind of tweak it for every person. And you're not just replacing a variable. You're not just saying like, hey, business name, I've got this great offer that da 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 da. You're actually going and using this structure. So if I was pitching lots of podcasts, I would have a podcast pitching template that would have the same reason. It would then just find a episode or something that I listen to where I'd go and say, I like this episode because I also appear, or I've also done like guest episodes, or I've been on these podcasts, or maybe I have my own, or whatever it is for the anchor, right? I would love to help you promote your podcast, get more exposure. That's the value. Would you like me to come in and be a guest? We'll record an episode on this. Here are the topic points that I want to talk about. And once we've done that, I will then promote it to my email database. I'll chop that video up and put it on social media for you, etc., right? So that's a way that you really build this level of connection and this level of rapport, because it's not just some generic spammy email I could have sent to like every single podcast host, like, hey, I love your podcast. It's great. I'm looking to be on more podcasts. Would you like me as a guest? You know, there's a big kind of gap in value there. There's no specific compliment. And honestly, it doesn't take a long time. Once you've got this template down, it doesn't take a long time to actually just switch out some of those variables and go and do like 30 seconds research. And the cool thing is you can scale it as well. So for example, if you have a VA or someone on your team, they can actually go and do that research for you and be like, hey, this is the thing, this is the podcast episode I listened to, and they can actually fill some of that stuff in once you've got a template. So if you found this valuable and interesting, we're going to be updating the PDF. So it hasn't been updated for a while. So here's the deal. Go grab it now, because we're actually going to be charging for it after this. I'm actually going to put it out as a paid PDF. If you go and grab that PDF now and you go and grab that guide, it's called Creative Control, then you will join our email list. And when that new updated, expanded version comes out, we will email that to you for free. And we're constantly updating. So if you get in now, you can have this for free. If you wait, then you have to pay. It won't be a huge amount of money, maybe 20 bucks or something like that. But if you want it for free, then grab the PDF using the link in the description. And that guide will give you way more examples, way more frameworks, and give you some ideas about actually how to make this work for your business. Hope you found that valuable. My name is Matt Essam, founder of Creative Life. And if you enjoyed this video, please hit the subscribe or follow button for more great, useful, juicy content. See you soon.